All right, so here we go, continuing our reading, now on page 94 of our text in social studies, which is chapter 4. So we are continuing chapter 4, Colonial New York. Let's dive in. There's a lot going on in these different sections. So trade and settlement in red. The fur trade. So this paragraph is going to be about the fur trade. This section here, the Patron System. We're going to learn all about that, the Patron System. And that continues over to this section, Peter Stuyvesant. So we'll learn about Peter Stuyvesant here. And then we'll end with population in New Amsterdam graph, bar graph in the 1660s. And then if we have time, we'll continue our reading up into the final page of 95. Let's see how far we get. Okay. Trade and settlement. New settlers came to the colony hoping to start a new life. So there was a purpose for new settlers to leave Europe, travel across the Atlantic Ocean, and to come to this colony. They wanted to start a new life. Not like we just started a new year. These folks wanted to start a new life with a big move, leaving the country, going to a new place. Some settlers came to farm. Others came to trade furs. Look at the map on page G11 to see where people settled. Okay, so let's bounce around a little bit, see if we can find G11. Okay, so that's in the front. Here's G6 and 7, G8, G9, G10, and here's G11. So where did the Dutch settle? It might be a little bit hard to see this green. It's actually green if you can't make it out on the video. But here's Fort Orange. So all the way up the Hudson River are the Dutch settlements right along the river. The English are in red, and you can see here they're in the tip of Long Island here. They're in this area in the Boston and the Plymouth settlement here. You could see Hartford, Connecticut, and all the way up, stretching up onto Maine. So this is all in the 1650s. So this gray area here, who would be living in this gray area? Yes, the Native Americans. Quick question. Who is also living in the green area and in the red area besides the Dutch and English? Native Americans. This is originally Native American territory. But there's something happening as the settlements are growing. The Indians are, the Native Americans are leaving their homeland and being pushed out. So we'll be looking for that in the text to see if it talks a little bit about that. Okay. Let's jump into the fur trade. The area around Fort Orange was the most important area in New Netherland for fur trading. In the springtime, Native Americans would come to Fort Orange in canoes filled with deer, mink, and beaver skins. They traded with the Dutch for such items as cloth, knives, metal pots, metal axes, and guns. So there is mention of the Native Americans, and right now this mention is that they are coming to Fort Orange. The Native Americans are coming to Fort Orange in canoes filled with things to actually trade with the Dutch. So we'll continue to be on the lookout to see what happens with the Native Americans as more and more settlers come to the colonies. So the Patron System. To get more people to settle in New Netherland, the Dutch West India Company had a plan. Remember, the Dutch West India Company, if I back up all the way out here, The Dutch West India Company was a company allowed by the Dutch government, and their goal was to send settlers to North America to set up a colony. Why? Because they were excited about all the reports that they had heard. They'd listened to stories of beavers and otters living in the forest, and they knew that Europeans loved to wear hats and clothing made from these furs. So their hope was that they would be able to trade furs, to be able to do some hunting, and get the animal skins to come back and to make hats and clothing. So this is really all about making money. This is all about making money. So the Patron System was to get more people to go to New Netherland. More people means more furs. More furs means more money when they bring it back to Europe. More skins means more money. It promised large amounts of land to anyone who brought 50 settlers to the colony. It's very interesting. So the Dutch West India Company saying, if you take 50 people with you to settle, I will give you, the Dutch West India Company says, I promise to give you a large amount of land. That sounds like a really good deal, doesn't it? So if you are a new settler, you're coming to hope to start a new life. Well, if you bring 50 settlers with you, you're going to get a huge chunk of land. And what can you do with that land? Well, you can farm. You could start a new life. You can trade. You can make your own money. So this system that was set up really drew people in because there was a promise of large amounts of land. The patroon was the person, I hope I'm saying that right. Patroon was the person who would own the land. The 50 settlers had to give the patroon part of their crops and livestock as a form of rent. At first, only 5 patroons were allowed to own land. However, life on the patroon's land was often very hard. Settlers had to clear the land for crops, build houses, and defend themselves from attacks by the Native Americans. There's mention right there. This Native American, there's some hostility going on. Soon, 4 of the patroons failed. In time, the laws changed, and more people were allowed to own land. People began to spread out in the colony. I'm going to pause there for a moment and go back to this map on page G11 real quick. Let me jump back there. So if you can get that picture in your mind as here's G11. So as people are settling in Fort Orange, they are spreading out now. This green section is spreading out. And so what that means is that if you're a Native American living in this area, now all of a sudden you have new settlers living in your area. And so when the text talked about having to defend themselves from attacks by the Native Americans, why would the Native Americans attack? Because the settlers are in their land. They're in their home. They're clearing the Native American land. They're building houses on their land. So Native Americans would attack. The text doesn't really go into that at great length yet, but we'll be on the lookout to learn more in our studies. So that's really to recognize as these settlers are moving in, Native Americans are being pushed out further and further away from their homelands. So let's see who Peter Stuyvesant is. I think we'll probably stop that video right there, actually. It's probably a good place to stop.